Hi, Saakar. Uh,
Hey,
could you give a brief introduction and a brief overview of your journey, research-wise as well as your undergrad life-wise?
yeah. So I joined IIT Kanpur in 2015 for my undergrad in aerospace engineering, and during my time there, I really enjoyed aerospace engineering. I sort of knew that I wanted to do it even before I started out.
Okay.
So that was one of my topmost choices on my counseling. This one.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was there, I worked at a research lab in IIT, one of the most regarded research labs that you can work on, you can work in. And in my third year, I came to the University of Michigan for an internship. And from there, I sort of realized that, I probably want to pursue this grad school thing. At the
Mm-hmm.
time, I really wasn't sure whether I want to do an MS or a PhD or where I see myself in 5 years, but I decided that I want to come to grad school, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that's what really led me to apply abroad. And I applied only to the US, but that's something that I might speak to later on here, that it's not necessarily the best thing to do. But
Okay.
I applied only to the US, and I got a bunch of admits. A few places didn't get an admit from them, but then I decided to come to Stanford.
Okay. Nice. You mentioned that you knew about you wanted to get into aerospace even before joining college.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
how has like that interest evolved over time, like before joining college versus undergrad versus grad?
Yeah. So before college, it was purely, actually, it wasn't just aerospace. I wanted to do anything between aerospace or mechanical engineering,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's simply because I was very good at physics in high
Mm-hmm.
school,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I decided that I probably want to carry this on, and there's a bunch of branches which focus around physics, but I really wanted to do these for one of those reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And um as I went through my courses and went through the years, first, second, third year, I just sort of gravitated towards doing some courses with some very good professors, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some of the most famous professors at the aerospace department, and then I went to do research with them. And that's what really shaped my interest into what I really do today, which is CFD, simulation driven design, numerical methods, and machine learning within fluid dynamics and structural mechanics.
Mm-hmm.
And my internship that I did in Michigan, it opened up this whole new pathway of machine learning within fluid dynamics and heat transfer and stuff. And since then, I've just been doing that. I mean, my majority of my graduate school coursework was focused around those topics, if not directly on them. And the job that I do right now is solely focused on that. So
Okay. Uh, so at any point, did you have confusion about whether you wanted to join industry versus you wanted to go for further research?
oh yeah. I think in my fourth year, I was very, very confused about that. And to the extent that I basically, half my applications were PhD applications and half of them were MS applications. That's how
Okay.
confused I was, which is not a nice place to be in. But I think as I thought over it, uh, over a few months, like December, January, February, and my admits started rolling, and I got a couple of PhD admits, I got a couple of MS admits. But by that time, I had sort of decided that I don't want to do a PhD, and I can go into the reasons for that.
Mm-hmm.
But that I came to that decision, and then I selectively looked at my MS admits and decided Stanford it is.
Okay. So what were those uh, factors that made you
Yeah.
wanted to go for a master's?
Yeah. So I the way I looked at it was like this, that to do a PhD, you need a particular mindset that really felt that I didn't have.
Mm-hmm.
Um, when you do an industry-based job or industry-based R&D versus academic research and academic R&D, the major difference between the two is that academic R&D, you're not looking for your work to have an immediate impact in the next 5 years, right? It
Mm-hmm.
can take 10, 20, 30 years for it
Yeah.
to actually be recognized and be utilized by the world. I mean, you look at AI right now, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
neural networks were proposed so long ago, but
Yeah.
today they're the rage, right? So
Mm-hmm.
and I really wanted to see myself in a role where I have a little bit more short-term impact, right? I felt like I want to do something which, 5 years down the line, I might see some sort of return on my effort, right?
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, this comes at the cost of, if you're doing an industry job, then more often than not, you're not going to always be able to do what you want to do. You're going to have to meet the needs of the firm or whoever you're working for,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to academic research where you have like almost complete freedom. If your PI allows it, then, and if it thinks it's relevant to your dissertation, then you can explore it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it was really a question of what I see myself doing, and because of that, I just decided on a personal level that I was a better fit for industry.
Okay. So right now you are completing your master's.
I finished my master's, right? I,
Okay.
I graduated like 2 months ago.
Okay. So are you joining industry now or?
Yeah, I
Okay.
started working in July.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, started working in July.
Okay. So during the period of your master's, were you still confused whether to apply for a PhD later on or a job?
Yeah. So when I came to Stanford, at first I thought that let's consider I might change my master's into a PhD, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a great place to do research as well. But I looked around me. I looked at some of the opportunities that I had. I visited one or two career fairs. Career fairs are a big thing here,
Mm-hmm.
and I can go into them if you'd like. But I realized that, what, I probably have enough going in order to get an industry role of my liking,
Okay.
right? So and yeah, that basically happened. So I interned in my first year summer. After my first year was done, I did an internship, and they basically asked me to come back after graduating. So yep, I just
Mm-hmm.
joined them. Okay.
I know many people in aerospace or mechanical related departments are scared to apply for higher studies in the US because they might have limited job opportunities because of various government rules. So,
Mhm.
what's your advice regarding that?
Yeah, so you're right that there is a subset of jobs in these fields, and more on the aerospace side than on the mechanical engineering side, that are ITAR restricted.
Mhm.
And because of that, the US government doesn't allow foreign nationals to work those jobs.
Mhm.
Those jobs, and these jobs are basically are more concentrated in the areas of aircraft design or propulsion or satellites or any space tech stuff, because all of this is considered sensitive military technology in the US.
Okay.
So if you want to do a just a master's in these spaces in the US, it's not a good idea. You should
Okay.
definitely reconsider, right? That said, there are some fields. So I've said I'd give a two-pronged answer. So the second thing is that there are some fields within aerospace engineering and more within mechanical engineering where it is possible and there is a demand. And to name some of them, if you're into autonomous systems and robotics, there's a pretty sizable demand on the East Coast and the West Coast.
Mhm.
If you're into fluid dynamics and CFD, again, applied CFD can become an ITAR restricted job again.
Mhm.
But like solver development, which is what I do, which is basically writing the math that does the CFD, right? That's not an ITAR restricted job. So if you're into solver development, you can always apply for an MS and find work here. um, but another thing that I should add is that, and this applies more to the mechanical engineers as well, is that jobs in the US tend to be extremely localized. Like you will, as a mechanical engineering graduate, you will have a much better chance at, yeah, maybe not much better chance, but you will have an easier time getting a job you like if you are in places like Michigan, closer to Detroit,
Mhm.
which is where the auto hub of the United States is, right? Versus in the Bay Area, right? I know a lot of mechanical engineers who did their MS from Stanford, and most of
Mhm.
them do nothing related to what they studied now, because the demand in the Bay Area is such that, you know it, the auto industry salaries are poor,
Mhm.
and there's just not as much demand compared to tech or machine learning or software engineering roles.
Mhm.
So these are the two things to keep in mind, right? First is that there are certain sectors of these branches which you should not come to for an MS at all, right?
Mhm.
Anything that sounds military related, you should not come. And
Mhm.
second is that jobs tend to be very localized. So it helps to do your degree from a place which already has a nice industry built around that. It's not like India
Okay.
where people are going to travel across the country to come and hire you,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's the difference.
Okay. Okay. So people like companies from Michigan, for example, won't come to hire at Stanford.
They might. I mean, so for example, Ford, GM, all of them have an R&D center here,
Mm-hmm.
right? So they'll turn up, but here's the catch, for example, that they did come to the career fair, but even at the career fair they were looking for people with CS and programming backgrounds, because they wanted people who could who knew autonomous systems and
Mm-hmm.
self-driving technology and like robotic autonomy and those kind of topics, right? So
Mm-hmm.
even within companies, like if you hand somebody at the Ford R&D center your resume for if you're very good at I'll just pick something out, internal combustion engines, right? It's going to go into the dustbin, because
Okay.
they're not concerned about that here. So
Mm-hmm.
you need to look at really how developed your target industry is in that region, and that can really help your chances of getting a job easily. I mean, you will get it, but it's hard sometimes.
Okay. Okay. So one has to like it's advisable to do your homework well before applying.
Mhm.
Right.
Yep.
So coming to that, like how did you decide which places you would be applying to? Uh,
So when I was at Michigan, I got the chance to network with some people, right? And I sort of knew that in Michigan and in the Bay Area and towards in Massachusetts, right? I know that there was some impetus towards this, solver development, right? I
mm-hmm.
knew that people were trying innovative things in solver development, and generally there was a demand for folks who know technologies like CFD and who know technologies like machine learning and artificial intelligence. That's my work really lies at the cross section of both of them. It's like half each,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I knew that there was this demand. So I knew that I would apply to UMich. I applied to Stanford. I would apply to a couple of colleges on the West Coast, Georgia Tech on the East Coast. Sorry, Georgia Tech
Mm-hmm.
and MIT and stuff. So my applications were really focused on both of these, like on the West Coast and the East Coast.
Mm-hmm.
And then I threw in one or two more just because they were nice places, UIUC um, and I think USC, yeah, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so I because I had come to the US and I had networked with some people, I knew that okay, there's potential opportunities there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You said you wanted to speak something about applying to US versus other countries.
So I applied solely to the US, and in hindsight and in general, that's not such a great idea. Very specially for aero astro majors, actually, more than anything else.
Mm-hmm.
Other majors, you can still come to the US and you can do well. But as I mentioned, for the reasons that I mentioned before, it can be a little bit tricky for aero astro majors, particularly for people who are in propulsion sciences or those ITAR restricted fields,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I've heard that Europe is a bit more lenient with their policies around these things, and Europe has some really good colleges, universities, ETH Zurich, TU Delft. So it's always a good idea to not put your eggs in one basket. That's like something we've just grown up learning, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's always a good idea to try Europe as well. See where that takes you.
So how many universities do you suggest that one should apply to, like including safe universities or universities of that matches their profile?
Um, I mean, this it's sort of depends on a case by case basis. Now, for example, if you're applying for a PhD,
Mm-hmm.
then the number doesn't matter as much as are you interested in the lab that you're applying to, right?
Mm-hmm.
The answer to this question for a PhD application is very, very different.
Mm-hmm.
For an only MS application, um, I would say that. So, for example, I applied to like I think 7 or 8 places, right? All put together, and the number really depends on how confident you are of getting into some of the target schools that you've set, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
do you think you'll get into the best ranked school that you've applied to, right? And if not, then how much of a safety buffer do you want? How adamant are you about really going to the US? Like, what if you don't get into a couple, two, three places, then do you have something else that you can do, or you absolutely want to go to the US? It sort of depends on that. This is a hard question for me to
Yeah.
answer, but I applied to like 7 or 8, but I was pretty adamant that I'm going to the US.
Okay. Okay. So it could depend person to person, basically.
Yeah, and again, it for MS to PhD as well. I mean, you're not going to apply for a PhD to universities where you have absolutely no idea what the research is, whether you're going to enjoy it. Is the lab that you're applying to, is it famous? Does it have a good publication record? How is the PI? Is he regarded well? Does he, what's his relationship with the students? All of these things are important questions for
Mm-hmm.
PhDs, right?
Okay. So
So
for masters, do you have to like send emails to research groups or professors beforehand?
you could, generally, in my experience, professors, at least, the higher rank the university gets, the more difficult it is for you to secure any funding beforehand,
Yeah.
right? That's true for a couple of reasons. First, because the higher rank the university gets, the more there is competition. I mean, you are joining people who are the best at what they do
Mm-hmm.
from across the world, right? And second, the higher rank the university is, the more professors are likely to want their students to do a PhD,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they can be choosy like that because they have a huge talent pool to choose from. There
Yeah.
is definitely somebody who's going to be willing to uh, to to do a PhD with a professor, and professors want people to do PhDs because it's just more efficient for professors to mentor students who are with them for 5 to 6 years as opposed
Yeah.
to 1 to 2 years,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's worth a shot. You can always try it, but the success rate, I mean, a PhD is always fully funded. I mean, if you're not getting a funded PhD, then there's no point,
Mm-hmm.
right? But the success rate for MS students, I have observed, is in getting funding right before landing there is generally better at lower ranked universities as opposed to higher ranked universities.
Okay. Moving on, like with regard to funding,
Hmm.
at least for PhD, as you mentioned, and as I'm aware that most PhD programs, at least good ones, are fully funded. So you need not worry about them while applying. What about masters? At least
So
in your department?
I mean, I can speak to my own experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I was not funded in my first year,
Mm-hmm.
but in my second year, in my first year, I did a bunch of courses, right? And I did very well in them. So I was pretty much throughout my second year, I was a TA,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it can be a bit of a gamble when you look at it like that. But I had enough confidence that I would get a nice job that would allow me to really pay my first year off in like a couple of years, maybe even less than that.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Yeah, but it can definitely feel like a gamble.
Okay.
And it also depends a lot on, again, where you are. So in Stanford, for example, the computer science department had a buttload of funding because it's Silicon Valley. I mean, people are just
Mm-hmm.
throwing money at
Yeah.
that department for something to come out, right?
Mm-hmm.
To the point where it is actually obscene,
Mm-hmm.
right? This would not be the case at some place like, at least I don't think so, it would be not be the case at some place like the University of Michigan, right?
Mm-hmm.
I know that the university, in the Mackey and Aero departments, the people are reasonably well funded, the departments are reasonably well funded to allow for MS students to at least try having a shot at doing a funded MS by research or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it again depends on the location of the university, the funds that the university has, the departments that are more rich in the university, let's call it,
Mm-hmm.
right? So yeah, it depends on a bunch of factors.
Okay. So you don't know like beforehand, like you don't apply for a scholarship at the time of applying for the grad school.
I mean, you can. So when you're filling out the form, there's and definitely an option that says I want to be considered for funding opportunities, and you obviously always tick that. But
Yeah.
um, it generally, so in my experience, I've seen a couple of things happen. First is that you get accepted, but you don't get any funding at all.
Mm-hmm.
Fairly. I mean, it happens. Fairly common situation. Sometimes what happens is you get accepted. You send your, you send your reply saying that okay, I'll join, and then sometime in May or June you get a funding letter for a TA
Okay.
position or an RA position. I've seen it happen to a couple of seniors,
Okay.
right? And sometimes I've seen people, their off funding, their offer letter for admission comes differently, comes separately, and they get a TA offer or an RA offer a few days later. It happened to one of my wingmates at
Okay.
IIT, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
So if you don't get a funding offer with your offer letter, you shouldn't feel bad about it. um, you can always wait a little bit more, and sometimes it happens. But again, as I said, there are funding opportunities at the university. If you do your homework, you can probably find out how good the funding opportunities are. Like, I was able to get funded throughout my second year, right? Just
Okay.
solely on the basis of TA ships, and I sort of knew that. I
Mhm.
knew that I would probably have to go about a year, or maybe a bit lesser, but at least about a year without funding. So
Okay.
if you have a plan for that, like I had a plan that if I get a job, which I got, then it's not an issue. So yeah.
Mhm. So it's probably a good idea to um, like inquire about that specific department and that specific university about how things work.
Yes, it's
Yeah.
it's always a good idea to get in touch with alums of the, like, recent alums of the department and university,
Mhm.
and you'll get a very good idea from there.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Now coming to the application process itself, like what was
Mhm.
the timeline for various things that you needed to prepare for example, GRE or SOP or asking for LORs?
So I think I started studying for GRE in like August,
Mm-hmm.
right after I came back from internship
Mm-hmm.
from Michigan, and I studied for about 1.5 months, off and on, right in the semester,
Mm-hmm.
and I gave GRE towards the end of September, and got my scores. I mean, I gave GRE and TOEFL together. Basically, I had
Yeah.
GRE, then next day I had TOEFL.
Mm-hmm.
So and LORs, scoping out who I would ask for LORs in like October.
Mm-hmm.
And by late October, I had asked everybody. I had formally met them, or I had emailed them and then gone to meet them. But I had formally asked everybody who I intended to ask for LORs. And I mean, I can give justifications for this timeline also. I gave GRE like early September, so that I can just get it off of my back, right? GRE
Mm-hmm.
TOEFL. Then you generally want to give professors about a month to a month and a half to submit your LORs. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
so you don't get to read your LOR; they will submit it directly, and professors are super super busy people. So it's a good idea to give them a nice buffer time, right? So to submit your recommendation, and they some of them will forget, so it's good to keep prodding them like once a week or once in 2 weeks to start with, and then once a week as the deadline comes closer. I mean, I've had professors who submitted the LOR literally 2 days before the deadline.
Yeah.
So but they'll do it, right? If they're serious about doing it, they'll do it.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that, and then the application forms themselves, they take a while to fill out, but as long as you do it before the deadline. Oh, and I think you have to submit the application before your LOR can be submitted, of course.
Yeah.
But besides that, there's really, so I think I filled them out in early November, late October.
Okay. So what's like the deadline for the final application process to be submitted for aerospace related departments?
It depended on the place. So I think
Yeah.
Stanford was 4th December. I mean,
Okay.
some of them were 4th December, some of them were 15th December, some of them were 15th January.
Okay. So it starts around early December. So
Yes,
okay.
and you generally start getting your acceptances late January, early February.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Uh, do you have to fill out a statement of purpose?
Hmm. Hmm.
Okay. So what advice would you give for that regarding what should one put in the SOP versus what one should avoid?
So again, I think this is something that really depends on the MS versus PhD.
Mm-hmm.
It is like the differences are massive. If you're applying for a PhD, then your SOP matters a lot more,
Mm-hmm.
because the university is going to invest 5 years of time and money into you. So you really have to be very clear about what your goals are, why you want to do a PhD, which research groups you're interested in, how is your experience, past experience relevant to those research groups, what coursework have you done. You can talk, although your transcript has it, but you can talk about it a little bit. What coursework have you done that will allow you to excel in that chosen field of yours? And in general, maybe talk a little bit about yourself, about how you're a good team player, and how you'll be a good fit at this lab that you're applying to. Right? For MS, it doesn't matter as much, but again, and if you're trying for any funding opportunities that you know exist, then again, it's important to address whatever prereqs are there for that funding opportunity in your SOP. But for an MS in general, it's not that important. But again, you should it in for an MS, I would highlight more your achievements so far. That in undergrad you were an academic achiever. You did this. You had these internships. You worked at this lab, and then talk about again why your academic and any internship experience you have is relevant to you succeeding at grad school, right? Really, you should look at it from the perspective of the reader of that application, that what the reader wants to know is, will you succeed in this program or not? So for masters, it's more about you being able to deal with the academics, and for PhD is more about you having the background and the love for research, and sticking it out for whatever time it takes to complete the PhD. So in a nutshell, if I had to summarize, look at it from the perspective of the reader. If you're applying for an MS, what would you look for in an MS application? Like what for you to say, okay, this guy whose SOP I'm reading, he can succeed.
At any point, did you like get feedback or ask any professor, any faculty member to review either your SOP or CV, or any advice regarding any part of the application process?
So I generally, I mean, I asked a couple of faculty members for just, I went and talked to them, and I was I was on nice speaking terms with them. So I went and asked a couple of them. They were not my recommenders, but I did go and just have a chat with them, and they were happy to help out. And besides that, to review my SOP, I did ask some people, and one thing that I did do was I asked people from a very wide variety of backgrounds. Like I asked some relatives, some of whom are in consulting, some of whom are in marketing, some of whom have prior research experience, some of them who don't know anything, who don't have anything to do with research. And it really gave me a very wide spectrum of feedback on what how good is this, like who does it actually appeal to. Because an SOP is basically like selling yourself. You have like n number of words to sell yourself. So it's a good idea to ask people from a wide variety of backgrounds, right?
Okay. Interesting.
It'll give you'll get different feedback from everybody, and then you can decide whether you want to apply it or not, right? Some people don't know what goes into a research SOP, so they might give you irrelevant information, but it's still good to get it.
I think this is a very common confusion amongst undergrads, that which qualities do this top schools look for, whether they must have high CPIs, or they must have very good internships, or they must have some research paper published, or they must have very good LORs. Like, do you know which how these factors weigh amongst themselves?
So I think we can go over each one, I think. So first of all, the first elephant in the room I want to address is GRE, right? And I've seen a lot of people like prepare like crazy for GRE, like over prepare. And to that, I would say that GRE today in US universities is used as a cutoff, right? It is just used as a filter because the top universities for the most competitive programs, they get a ton of applications, right? It's unbelievable, right? I saw a little bit of the volume of applications they got there, and it was just crazy, right? So they use it as a filter just to mass filter some people out. But if you generally have a GRE score of above 325 for most US universities and above 330 for any US university, you're fine. I mean, you will not get filtered out below 330 from anywhere. And for most US universities, 325, even 320 is a safe score, right? It also in that the interplay matters. So you should have a very good quant score, right? I mean, you shouldn't be applying to a quant program and have a quant score of 155. That's not okay. So but beyond that, people should not aim to like score full marks in GRE like the way we aim to score full marks in tests or whatever, right? So that's that. Second, I think GPA is important because GPA is an indicator to the school that you're applying to, that you can actually study, you're interested in your coursework, and you can imbibe from books, imbibe from professors, and then whatever method of testing is used, you can generally succeed at it, right?
Mm-hmm.
um, so GPA is important. SOP I've already talked about. It's much more important for PhD than for MS, but it's
Mm-hmm.
still nice to have a good SOP.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the most important factor is recommendations. It is because, and again, for especially for PhD, if you're applying for a PhD, then your recommendations really have to speak to your research potential,
Mm-hmm.
right? I have seen people who have zero research papers in undergrad get into some of the best institutes in the world, simply because although they didn't have a publication, their recommenders said that, this guy, he has the potential to really make it in academia or PhD research or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
right? So the recommendation is the single most important thing, I would say, even for an MS program.
Okay.
And after that, I would probably weigh it as GPA, then SOP. I've already said what the caveats are. And is there anything else that's important? Um, not at the top of my head, but again, I would
At
say
the end, the GRE scores.
at the end, the GRE score. Like,
Yeah.
people should not try and score 340 out of 340.
Mm-hmm.
It's a waste of effort and time.
Yeah. Do you have any advice for, since many students ask this, like how to prepare for GRE and TOEFL?
I just used to let me see. So what I can go very algorithmically what I did, right?
Mm-hmm.
The first thing I did was I took a couple of practice tests, like two
Mm-hmm.
of them, right? There's plenty of free resources should you want them. The only thing that you should actually invest in money in is the actual, if you can't find it online, that is, the actual the ETS, I think it's called ETS, right? The ETS textbook that comes, because those questions are the closest that you will get to the actual GRE.
Mm-hmm.
So I took one or two tests from online resources and from ETS, I think one each, saw where my score was at, right? Figured out what I needed to work on,
Mm-hmm.
right? Especially for most people in engineering, and I would imagine a large audience to this would be engineers, right?
Mm-hmm.
For most people in science and engineering, quant is not a problem, right? But verbal is, and it was the case for me also.
Mm-hmm.
So I just spent my time building vocabulary after that. There's two ways to do it, very standard ways. There's this book that comes. I don't remember the name anymore. Word Power Made Easy. Yeah, Word Power Made Easy.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very, everybody will tell you to use that book, but it works. I enjoy reading it, and the word stuck in my head. And for a little vocabulary beyond that, you have the Magoosh flashcards, I think they were
Mm-hmm.
called,
Yeah.
right? I just used to do them like 20 minutes a day or something at night.
Okay.
That's a half an hour a day,
Mm-hmm.
and that really covered the vocabulary part for me. And beyond that, reading comprehension is something that people that I used to struggle with. People also generally struggle with, and for
Mm-hmm.
that, I would say the only thing you can do is to A, practice, and B, it's important to understand how much time you need for reading comprehensions. So in any verbal section, it's a 30-minute section, and it's divided into 20 questions, right? Out of which I think 60% of them are fill in the blanks, which basically test your vocabulary, and the rest of them are comprehension, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's important for you to strike your balance on how much time you need for comprehension. For example, I decided that I need roughly 18 minutes for comprehension to do
Mm-hmm.
those comprehensions, and the rest of the time I knew that I could finish my fill in the blank questions in 12 minutes, not
Okay.
more than that.
Mm-hmm.
So once you have that idea, right, how much time you need, it's easy to pace yourself, and you will generally not stress out, or you won't panic or anything like that, and that you'll get that idea when you just practice questions.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Um, and yeah, this is like part of the letters of recommendations. Like, this is a very common question, that who should one be asking the letters of recommendations from,
Mm.
especially if like more than two or so are needed.
Mm-hmm. So, first of all, professors who you have done research with, or if you're applying after doing some work ex, or you've done an industry internship, then your direct supervisor at whichever firm you worked with. I think because these people have worked with you in a professional capacity, like, not just student capacity, so they are in a good position to actually judge you. One of the biggest problems with LORs is that is a generic LOR, like just a generic LOR does no favors to anybody, right? And you want at least one or two LORs which actually describe you in proper detail. And the only way somebody can describe you, your work ethic, how are you as a person, the only way somebody can describe that well is if they've spent some time working with you in a professional capacity, right? So either having you as a research intern, or you've done a industry intern with them, right? So that should be your first stop, right? Now I know that some places ask for 3-4 LORs, and what if you don't have 3-4 people who have mentored you, right? then then your next step is to go to professors who you've taken multiple courses with, right? They probably, if you've done very well in those courses, they probably know you by name. And if they know you by name, then you know that you're probably going to get a nice recommendation. It's still not as good as one that you would get from a work supervisor or research supervisor, but it won't be a generic LOR also, right? And finally, to fill the gaps, I mean, I had a gap to fill. I had to submit 3 LORs everywhere, and I had 2 research mentors. So I went to course instructors, and a couple of them gave me the generic LOR. Right now, I know that that probably didn't help my admission scores much, but sometimes you have to do that. So, so that's the way I would divide it.
Yeah, like, is there some restriction regarding which departments you have to do your undergrad in to apply for grad school in either aerospace related departments?
Um, I would say it depends on. So the US is a lot. The US universities actually are a lot more flexible in this matter. It's not like Indian universities where if you're in a department, you're in a department. But they generally, and this is another thing actually, coming back to the GPA point that you made, that the core GPA number itself is not super important, but what's important to the US universities, I'm speaking about the US here, but I think this applies generally across the world, that um, what were your grades in the courses that you took and in the courses that you are looking to work further in? That's the important question, right? And because US universities have this approach to your transcript and not just your GPA, if you take courses in undergrad that really reflect that, okay, these courses are not from your department, but they are, let's say you are a mechanical engineering major, but you took some courses in CS or math or E or whatever, right? And then you want to apply for an MS in that. Um, you will be at a slight disadvantage because there will be people who will have EE backgrounds. They will have a lot more EE courses in addition to the courses that you've done. But you can still, there's still a case for you. Like, you should apply if you want to. That you can, and I've seen plenty of people make the switch, for example, from EE to CS. I mean, that's something that I've seen all the time, right? So that's just one example. There are many examples of that, but if you have some relevant coursework in your undergrad, then you can try, or you have some work experience. For example, you did something completely unrelated in undergrad, but you worked for 3 years in business analytics, right? Then applying for a MS in business analytics makes perfect sense.
Okay, basically, as long as you can motivate what inspired you to basically apply for the different department.
Exactly. If you have the correct background, if the university has to feel that you have the background to not struggle or to not fail courses at the university, you're good.
Okay. Then do you have any useful links or anything else that helped you in the application process that you have in mind?
Um, that was like 3 years ago now. So
Yeah.
links. I'm a little. I can't remember off the back of my hand links, but
Yeah.
if I remember something, I'll share it with you.
Yeah, sure. By link, I mean any kind of resources, or for example, you mentioned, for example, a book for GRE. Similar, like, do you recall like videos or articles?
Uh, I mean, yeah, I'll have to. I don't remember. I'll have to think about it.
Okay, sure. All right. So did you have any interviews for your applications, and how was that experience like?
So wherever I applied for a PhD, I had an interview, and
Mhm.
that's standard,
Yeah.
right? I mean, you are going to have interviews from those places.
Mhm.
So but the interview process generally is sort of chill, I would say. I mean, um, they generally just again want you to back up what you've said in your SOP.
Mhm.
That why are you interested, and what is your goal here, why do you want to pursue a PhD in this lab with this person. So I didn't have any interviews for MS applications.
Okay. So one can expect interviews for PhD programs, but not so for master.
Not so much. I don't think I've heard. I mean, you might have it if you somebody's interested in taking you on as an RA or a TA before,
Okay.
like before you even start.
Mhm.
um then you might have it, but otherwise no.
Okay. Like the whole process of applying involves like a lot of preparation, a lot of detailing into each application, and
Mhm.
even after that, like the chance of acceptance is quite low. Or so, what did you advise, like the how to deal with that waiting period, plus how to deal with the rejections and stuff?
I think the most important thing is that if you're not confident of getting in at least one place, then you should probably sit for placements. It's
Mm-hmm.
something that I didn't do, but I was fairly confident that I would get into a couple of places. I just knew straight up. So I didn't sit for them, but in general, if you're not super confident, you should sit for placements. And there's nothing barring you from sitting for placements if you're applying abroad, right?
Yeah.
So it's generally just a good idea to sit for placements,
Okay.
right? After that, although I'm not sure what the ramifications with the what was it, the placement office of the university is and all that, but if you can sit for placements, right, if it's
Yeah, I think
allowed.
that's allowed. Yeah.
Okay, so if you can sit for placements, that gives you a buffer, right? That gives you a safety net to fall back on. You should
Mm-hmm.
not, at the end of when you have your degree in hand, you should not be going nowhere. Everybody else
Mm-hmm.
is going everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So um, that's the first thing. Second thing is it can get a little bit nervy. I mean, I remember I used to check my phone like 5 times a day for some kind of
Yeah.
acceptance to come, but all of them eventually came. But just just hang tight, I guess. That's really the best thing I
Yeah.
can say. You'll get accepted from some places. I mean, I would say, I mean, if I may say so myself, that I had a reasonably nice profile, right? But even
Mm-hmm.
I got rejected from some places. I was pretty surprised that, oh
Mm-hmm.
wow, okay. So you should never take rejection personally. It's just the university doesn't see you as a good fit there, or they just don't have space. So maybe
Yeah.
they don't have funding for you or whatever it is. So
Mm-hmm.
you should never look at one university and say, I want to go just here, and if you don't get to go there, then you shouldn't feel bad or anything.
Yeah.
It's just the way the world is.
Yeah. I guess it could at times depend on like factors beyond your control.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Maybe the professor you want to work with is taking a 2-year leave.
Mm-hmm.
He's never going to take you on then. So it's
Yeah.
just what it is.
Yeah. So do you have any final advice or any final suggestions for those who are like listening or seeing this?
Um, I would say that plan ahead before you come to the US. You should have some sort of career roadmap in mind, because once you are in the US, things move very, very quickly. In the
Mm-hmm.
US or wherever you're going for grad school,
Mm-hmm.
things move very, very quickly. What often happens is that you will be swept up by the jump in difficulty level. I was, and everybody around me was, like, we were
Mm-hmm.
just taken aback by the speed and the and not just difficulty, but even the speed at which academics happen here,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's very helpful to have some sort of roadmap of where you see yourself, and some clarity of what you want to do. Are you doing a PhD or not? If you aren't, then when do you want to start applying for internships? When do you want to start networking?
Mm-hmm.
It helps to have that roadmap in place, so that you're not feeling lost at any point of time. Because one thing that does happen to some people is that it can get stressful if you're not on the path where you want to be. Because when you're a foreign student, right, there's a host of immigration issues,
Yeah.
and people, it's it can get stressful as a foreign student,
Mm-hmm.
and you're so far away from home. So it can happen, right? So
Mm-hmm.
a way to deal with that is to have some sort of idea of where you want to be at what stage in your grad school program. And otherwise, just you should also enjoy yourself. Like the US is or I mean, wherever you go to grad school is going to be plenty of opportunities to do that and enjoy network. And yeah, it's a life-changing experience.
Yeah, sure. Also, like, if someone wants to, could they contact you if they have any query regarding the application process?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I mean, they should get in touch with me on LinkedIn, and I mean, send me a message on LinkedIn saying that they saw this video and they want to
Okay.
talk to me about it. And yeah, I'd be happy to help.
Okay, sure. Uh, like, I had another question. Maybe this is not part of this, but just I wanted to know, like, since you
Mhm.
did a master's, so you would have seen how the courses work at Stanford. So how do you think, what's the difference between, say, how courses work at IIT Kanpur versus how it works at Stanford?
So the first difference is that they go incredibly fast,
Mm-hmm.
right? You're just expected to keep up. The second difference is that the courses were a lot more applied. Half the courses had projects in them.
Mm-hmm.
There were very few courses at IITK which had projects in them. Most of the grading was done based on exams and quizzes.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and uh, that to me, that's really the biggest difference. But the one of the other differences I feel is that um, the faculty at Stanford were extremely good at teaching things very very intuitively.
Okay.
Now I had professors at IITK also who could do that, and some of them were like brilliant, but I just felt like that was a more common theme here. I mean,
Okay.
I did some courses here that really completely changed my outlook on how I look at things. I mean,
Okay.
I can name one course that it's called decision making under uncertainty,
Mm-hmm.
right? And now I look at the world in a completely different way. I look at it in the framework of what's called MDPs. It's quite bizarre, but you'll do a couple of courses like that, and I did a couple of courses here at Stanford which just completely changed the way you look at the world, and that's what education is about.
Yeah.
So beyond that, I mean, IITK is one of the best colleges in India, right? But there are these factors that I mentioned, just encouraging creativity, a lot of free rope, not uh, project based coursework, and just incredible instruction. I think these are the things that set it apart.
That's all. Thanks a lot for giving the time. Yeah.
Arey, no worries.
Yeah.
This is always good to give back.
Yeah.
I had a bunch of mentors when I was applying, and
Yeah.
so it's always good to just give back.
Yeah. Sure. Thank you.